Welcome to the Fourth Range program, the place for common sense. Today is Friday, July 12, 2019. I am MD. In 60 seconds, we will give you the world. Live from New York City, at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Fourth Branch presents discussions, debates, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. If you've been here before, thank you for your participation. It makes the journey a tad lighter, a bit more bearable. If you're here for the first time, once again, welcome to the Fourth Branch. The Fourth Branch program is not associated with any political party. And we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to perfect the union. In order to do so, we ought to remove the biggest obstacle of all: ignorance. JFK said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. Thus, the importance of removing ignorance from the equation. Today, we will continue the reading of the Mueller report. We have been reading Volume 2, and we will continue to do so until July 17, 2019. That is the date Robert Mueller is scheduled to be on Capitol Hill to talk about, well, what else? The report. We will say a little bit more about that in just a moment. I hope you had a fantastic night. I know that you'll wake up just like the rest of us to more chaos, more confusion, and to asking yourself, when is it ever going to end? In conversation with my fellow Republicans, I've always felt baffled. And the reason is because, well, there are many reasons, but I'm gonna just mention a couple of them. At some point during the Trump administration, I should say not at some point, many times during the Trump administration, we here at the forefront have questioned our own sanity. And the reason is simple, and I'm certain that we are not alone, and many others in many other areas, venues, probably have come to that point where you sit down and you ask yourself, who is right? Who is sane? Now, we do this exercise not because we have any doubt as to where we stand, but rather to try to understand through the prism of those of Trump and those who support him as to what exactly is going on through their mind. There can be only one reality, and facts are not something you can argue with. When proof accompanies those, either a statement, it's in a logical world, it is impossible for anyone, no matter how bold one is, no matter how audacious someone is, it is very difficult to imagine that individual can argue with facts. This is a pen. It's totally irrelevant as to whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, but you will find out, if you have not yet, that if you are talking to a Republican in general, a Trump fanatic in particular, that may not be a pen. Now, I don't say that, I guess it sounds like a joke, but it is true that there is no, it seems almost impossible to have a conversation with an individual unless that individual subscribe to, one, the truth, and subscribe to logic, because it's impossible for two people to have a conversation and come to a conclusion unless both individuals are on the same level in terms of understanding, education. You don't have to belong to the same political party. You don't have to agree to whatever is in discussion, but the premise of life, the reason today we have cure for diseases, the reason we have progress in technology, the reason that mankind has progress from the ice age, if you like, to modern time, is because there is a standard, a base, if you like, that mankind has come to accept. This is where we start. This is what we're gonna base anything that we going to try to do, any progress that we ought to make. We have to have a base. For instance, we know that the ground we stand on is solid, it's gonna be there, and we can exercise pressure on it and it will stand. That's the reason, notwithstanding earthquake, notwithstanding other natural disasters, of course, those are not, those are exceptional cases. But the base of a lot of decision that we human, in the human species, rational people, logical people make, is by accepting those premises, and by accepting them we can build on our life. I'll give you an example. An architect, building architect that is, ought to come to the conclusion, well, after studies, I'm certain, I'm fast forwarding the conversation here, ought to come to the conclusion that the site that's chosen to build a massive building, that ground has been analyzed, has been surveyed, and a number of studies have been made by experts in the area, of course, that says that not only this area is safe in terms of depth, in terms of natural disaster, etc., etc., only at that time that the engineer would decide to have construction being done in that particular site. Now, I said that because it's important to understand that the basis of our own existence depends on the acceptance of certain factors, certain principles, and on logic. In conversation with my fellow Republicans, I found out time and again and again and again and again that logic is not something that most of them subscribe to. I mentioned before here, and I'll mention it again, the only differentiator between the human species and the animal species, or all other animal species, is the ability, the logic ability that we have. That's really the big differentiator. If we throw away logic, or we unable to use logic, we are no better than all other animal species. Thus far, on planet Earth, we, the human species, are the only one capable of making the kind of progress that we have made. And the reason is because we're able to understand where we are, we're able to understand this is the ground, and we're able to understand that we can build on the ground. So in every aspect of our lives, we have to accept the premise of logic. That's why it's so baffling that you have millions of individuals who subscribe to nonsense. Even more troubling is the fact that those individuals are able to rationalize nonsense. There can only be one fact about anything that you take to understand Now, if you are not able to analyze, if you are not able to come to conclusion, you are deprived of that ability, then yes, the conversation about how to make things better become one of the most difficult thing in life. I heard many times that since Donald Trump has become president, that the Republican Party has become the Donald Trump Party, and that's the reason we have the predicament we have. Now, if you talk to Republican in general, Trump fanatics in particular, you may get the question, which problem? And I always start by asking any of my fellow Republicans that I talk to. And the reason I do that is because I want to gauge, to get a sense that at the very least, they are not completely gone. Because while it may sound almost impossible to believe that millions of people could be completely deprived of logic, which they don't believe they are, and that's usually the big puzzle to solve. So I always start with the following question, because that give anyone the ability to gauge whether it's something else or those individuals are regressing in terms of human being. I always ask the question, would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children and your grandchildren? I ask Jim Jordan that question, Mark Meadows, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell. I keep asking that question to them, and the reason is very simple. If you believe the individual that you supporting, you defending, despite proof that that individual has done the greatest damage to the nation, has been the vilest individual, has committed crime, is a crook, a criminal, if you believe that individual is that great, would you use that individual as a role model for your children and your grandchildren? I always start with this question and give whomsoever I'm in conversation with the chance to realize that they have misplaced their trust, they have misplaced their support. So the question to any more of my fellow Republicans, who I even have one of the gentlemen, I remember very clearly that in one of the article I published on the peoplebranch.org website, and one of the I'm just going to paraphrase here because I don't really recall the not only the title of the article but the context of the article, but I recall the gentleman mentioned after one of the sentences that were part of the article that said, now that we know about those individuals like Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, etc., etc. So I mentioned that those individuals in the sentence as being individuals who were part of the Trump camp and who collaborated and were dancing with Russia. And the sentence, again paraphrasing that, now that we know that, and of course I end up the sentence by saying that something to the effect that if all those individuals were so deeply ingrained in the Trump camp, were all part of, or at least negotiating all those activities with Russia, then you don't have to be a genius to be able to come to the conclusion that the Trump camp approves and was very welcoming to the idea of support from a foreign enemy. And the gentleman asked the question, where did you hear that? From Rachel Maddow? As you can see, having a conversation with an individual who is incapable of logic, who is simply watching individuals such as on Fox who are lying to them on a daily basis, it is impossible to have a conversation in order to save the country from the predicament it's in. Because the very question the individual asked me, tell me that that individual has no idea whatsoever as to what's going on in the country. And I replied to the individual by saying, I'm going to tell you something extremely outrageous here, so bear with me. All that I just mentioned is part of court document, made public, that everybody, anybody have access to. Those are simple things that are happening in the United States of America. And that individual is typical of people who support, who defend Donald Trump in the face of mountain of proof that he is a criminal, is a crook, is a liar. And yet those individuals who have a very hard time or would not at any point in their life use Donald Trump as a role model for their children, their grandchildren, those are the individuals who don't have any qualm trying to defend an individual who is indefendable and defensible. Now, as you can see, and contrary to what the conversation in the media has been, that the Republican Party has become a Donald Trump party. Those things did not start to happen under Donald Trump. And I mentioned that before many times here. Those were already aspect of the Republican Party. Donald Trump happened to be a big mouth. It happened to legitimize every nonsense to become part of the mainstream. So people from all walks of life feel now free to express their to blurt out their stupidity without any repercussion, because to them, if the individual who has the highest office in the land can be so stupid, so ridiculous, so outrageous, and the world is okay with that, so to speak, not in reality. So why not follow his footsteps? So we do have a problem. And every time that I have a conversation with any Republican that's trying to show the great side of Donald Trump, because that's where the conversation always leads to. We know Donald Trump is a criminal because the individual who's done for him all that he asked to be done is currently sitting in jail as a criminal. There is no argument there. There is no if and but about it. The only reason, and it's clearly mentioned in the Department of Justice, DOJ manual, the only reason Donald Trump is not indicted is because he sits in the Oval Office. Yes, you heard correctly. Donald Trump is a criminal. Not by some damn liberal saying that, but because he committed crimes. And the only reason he's not being held accountable is because the Department of Justice, I believe it could have been 1978 or 1998, I'm no longer sure, published manual that prevent the Department of Justice from indicting a sitting president. That's all there is to it. So we are, the United States of America is governed by a criminal. How is that for Make America Great Again? Criminals do criminal things. They commit crime. And even after Donald Trump get elected, you would have thought, okay, now that he realized he's going to be president, he would shed all those criminal-minded ways of doing things. Instead, he had refined them. There is nothing to defend about Donald Trump, because I know that you know that, because if you have difficulty saying that you would use Donald Trump as a role model for your children and your grandchildren, I know that you know there is nothing to defend Donald Trump for. Because if you come to that conclusion that it's not good enough to use him as a role model for your children, you already answered the question that is not fit to be president of the United States. So the baffling part is, why would you continue to defend someone who is a criminal, someone you would not use as a role model for your children? Why would you? Now, if you want to take it from the way that we humans process things, that means you value your children, you don't value the United States of America. That's all there is to it. I always knew that. I wrote about that many times. So that's not a surprise to me personally, because I wrote several times before Donald Trump even bidded for the office of the presidency that the Republicans are no patriot. I always know that. I mean, they claim, they take a bullhorn saying that they're patriot. They want to pause as the defenders of the nation. And for a very long time, the country believed them. I never did. Because their actions have always proven to me that they only give lip service, but they do not live as patriot. And they've proven that over and over before Donald Trump even set foot in the Oval Office. Today, it's more obvious to most people, of course, but it's something that you never want to question people about their patriotism. That's why most people didn't see it. But it was much too obvious to notice that Republicans never care much about the United States of America. They say they do, but they never care much because their action never prove that they care that much about the country. And today, it's obvious to most people that's the case. Even today, some people go on national TV are still afraid of calling the devil by its name. And that's the problem, because we are so careful trying not to say something that's so obvious that the people that are committing those type of egregious crime, if you want, think, oh, nobody noticed. Then we can continue to do so. And I'll say it again. If you realize that Donald Trump is not good enough to be used as a role model for your children and your grandchildren, but you continue to support him to be the president of the United States, it can simply mean one thing. You do not care about the United States of America. If you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged. Because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican. Because the very reason that our democracy survives is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a Republican and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. If you are okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give up, who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order to preserve the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot. Before we begin the reading of the Mueller report, there is some good news about at least someone in life, and it is Danielle Metz. Now, the woman you're looking at, well, the older one you're looking at is Danielle Metz. Now, Danielle Metz was going to spend the rest of her life in jail. She's now 50 years old. And the reason is because in 1993, Danielle Metz was at that time a part-time student, a beauty school student, and she was also a part-time courier in New Orleans, Louisiana, and she was arrested because she was transporting cocaine to Houston, Texas, for her husband. Now, without going through the detail of the case, she was sentenced to 3 consecutive life in prison plus 20 years for her role in the distribution of cocaine. So in other words, she had no chance of coming out of jail. However, in 2010 or 2018, I'm not sure of the exact date, but during the Obama tenure, while Obama was issuing pardon clemencies for people in jail, Danielle petitioned for her release as well, and she got lucky, and she was also released among the people that Obama signed to have released from jail. She was released. Now that was not a small thing. Now that happened, the release part happened in 2016. That wasn't a small thing, because by then she had already served 23 years behind bars. Now that didn't mean anything for her, because as far as the law, as the sentence is concerned, she had 3 life sentences plus 20 years on top of that. That means if she were to live 3 lives, of course, if we take each life to be close to 100 years, so she would have to be 320 years in order to come out of jail. So she was serving 3 life sentences plus 20 years for distribution of cocaine. Now, that's a different issue that we have with the justice system, the way that they penalize people. This is not to condone that the fact she was distributing cocaine was bad, but at no point during the time that she was doing that was she a violent criminal. But her sentence was 3 life sentences plus 20 years. Now we'll get back to that aspect of the justice system at some other time in some other topic. But Obama freed her in 2016, granted her clemency in 2016, after 23 years in jail. But the reason that we're talking about her is because today Danielle Metz has made the dean list at Southern University of New Orleans. She has a 3.75 GPA. This is not small either, because someone who did not have any hope of ever walking out of jail received clemency in 2016. 3 years later, not only she is in school, in college, she did get her GED while in jail. Not only she is in college, but she's doing extremely well. She is in the dean list. Now, just a side note, that Louisiana in general has a record, not a good one, highest incarceration rate in the nation. Highest incarceration rate, and also the lowest rate of black college graduates. This is nothing for Louisiana to be proud of. Highest incarceration rate and lowest rate of black college graduate. But we say good luck to Danielle Metz And we're not the only one. Obama also did send her a letter and congratulated her and wishing her many success in life. That particular example is something we will use later, not today, in a different topic to make the case about the system of justice in America. The reading of the Mueller report, factual result of the obstruction investigation. For those of you who have been following the reading of the report, we're now reading from volume 2, which is the second volume that Mueller released to the Department of Justice. At this point, we are currently reading the section in which Robert Mueller providing a basis for the investigation done in regards to obstruction of justice by the President of the United States. Not only is providing providing explanation of terms used, but is also providing references of cases in terms of obstruction of justice, different aspects of obstruction of justice. So as such, we are showing you that the President of the United States committed a crime, and the Republican legislative body say that is fine by us. In fact, the biggest problem is the fact that we have found out that many legislators in Washington, both Democrats and Republicans, but overwhelmingly Republicans, did not even bother to read the Mueller report. How is that for people you elected to represent you? They did not even to bother to read a report about an investigation which clearly detail the interference of a foreign country, an enemy at that, into the United States of America. How about that for people who represent you?
The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. And we conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting Attorney General apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the President clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
We had confidence that the President did not commit a crime, we would have said so. How is your English? Factual result of the obstruction investigation. This section of the report details the evidence we obtained. We first provide an overview of how Russia became an issue in the 2016 presidential campaign and how candidate Trump responded. We then turn to the key events that we investigated. the president's conduct concerning the FBI investigation of Michael Flynn, the president's reaction to public confirmation of the FBI Russia investigation, events leading up to and surrounding the termination of FBI Director Comey, efforts to terminate the special counsel, efforts to curtail the scope of the special counsel investigation, efforts to prevent disclosure of information about the June 9, 2016 Trump Tower meeting between Russian and senior campaign officials, efforts to have the Attorney General unrecused, and conduct towards McGahn, Cohen, and other witnesses. We summarize the evidence we found and then analyze it by reference to the three statutory obstruction of justice elements: obstructive acts, nexus to a proceeding, and intent. We focus on elements because by regulation the special counsel has, quote, jurisdiction to investigate federal crimes committed in the course of and with intent to interfere with the special counsel investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses, end of quote. 28 CFR 600.4a. Consistent with our jurisdiction to investigate federal obstruction crimes, we gathered evidence that is relevant to the elements of those crimes and analyzed them within an element framework, while refraining from reaching ultimate conclusion about whether crimes were committed for the reason explained above. This section also does not address legal and constitutional defenses raised by counsel for the president. Those defenses are analyzed in Volume 2, Section 3, infra. Let me read to you again why Robert Mueller did not issue any conclusion about the investigation. Consistent with our jurisdiction to investigate federal obstruction crimes, we gathered evidence that is relevant to the elements of those crimes and analyzed them within an element framework, while refraining from reaching ultimate conclusion about whether crimes were committed for the reason explained above. In case you did not watch the previous episode of this reading, what Robert Mueller is referring to is his office did not bother to say whether the president committed a crime because it would be unfair to the president because he would not be able to defend himself. That's number one. But most importantly, because the Department of Justice says that the Department of Justice cannot indict a sitting president. As such, any prosecutor who would have come and say that the president committed a crime but unable to indict the president make the matter a moot issue. That's why Special Counsel Robert Mueller decided not to do that. So for those who are arguing, including William Barr, that the president did not commit a crime, that's not what Robert Mueller said in the report. He refrained his office from doing so, from coming to that conclusion, because by coming to that conclusion, he would have been obligated to indict the individual, which he cannot, according to the Department of Justice guideline. The campaign's response to reports about Russian support for Donald Trump. During the 2016 campaign, the media raised questions about a possible connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. The question intensified after WikiLeaks released politically damaging Democratic Party email that were reported to have been hacked by Russia. Trump responded to questions about possible connection to Russia by denying any business involvement in Russia, even though the Trump organization had pursued a business project in Russia as late as June 2016. Trump also expressed skepticism that Russia had hacked the email at the same time as he and other campaign advisors privately sought information about any further planned WikiLeaks releases. After the election, when questions persisted about possible links between Russia and the Trump campaign, the president-elect continued to deny connection to Russia and privately expressed concern that reports of Russian election interference might lead the public to question the legitimacy of his election. Press reports allege links between the Trump campaign and Russia. On June 16, 2015, Donald J. Trump declared his intent to seek nomination as the Republican candidate for president. By early 2016, he distinguished himself among Republican candidates by speaking of closer ties with Russia, saying he would get along well with Russian President Vladimir Putin, questioning whether the NATO alliance was obsolete, and praising Putin as a strong leader. The press reported that Russian political analysts and commentators perceived Trump as favorable to Russia. Beginning in February 2016 and continuing through the summer, the media reported that several Trump campaign advisors appeared to have ties to Russia. For example, the press reported that campaign advisor Michael Flynn was seated next to Vladimir Putin at an RT gala in Moscow in December of 2015, and that Flynn had appeared regularly on RT as an analyst. By the way, RT is a network of Russia Today. That's an English network representing Russia views, but broadcasted in English. The press also reported that foreign policy advisor Carter Page had ties to a Russian state-run gas company, and the campaign chairman Paul Manafort had done work for the Russian-backed former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. In addition, the press raised questions during the Republican National Convention about the Trump campaign involvement in changing the Republican platform stance on giving, quote, weapons to Ukraine to fight Russian and rebel forces. The Trump campaign reacts to WikiLeaks' release of hacked email. On June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm that had conducted in-house analysis for the Democratic National Committee, DNC, posted an announcement that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC computer and obtained access to documents. On July 22, 2016, the day before the Democratic National Convention, WikiLeaks posted thousands of hacked DNC documents revealing sensitive internal deliberation. Soon thereafter, Hillary Clinton campaign manager publicly contended that Russia had hacked the DNC email and arranged their release in order to help candidate Trump. On July 26, 2016, the New York Times reported that U.S. intelligence agency had told the White House they now have high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of email and document from the Democratic National Committee. Within the Trump campaign, aides reacted with enthusiasm to reports of the hack. The first part of the following sentence has been redacted harm to ongoing matter and followed by discussed with campaign official that WikiLeaks, it's most likely a name of an individual, we discussed with campaign official that WikiLeaks would release the hacked material. Some witnesses say that Trump himself discussed the possibility of upcoming release as well. Michael Cohen, then executive vice president of the Trump Organization and special counsel to Trump, recalled hearing, well, whatever he heard has been redacted, harm to ongoing matter. Cohen recalled that Trump responded to Donald Trump Jr., "Oh, good, all right," and, well, whoever the individual is, has been redacted, harm to ongoing matter. Manafort said that shortly after WikiLeaks July 22, 2016 release of hacked document, he spoke to Trump. The remaining part of the sentence has been redacted, harm to ongoing matter. Manafort recalled that Trump responded that Manafort should, part of this is redacted, keep Trump updated. Deputy campaign manager Rick Gates said that Manafort was getting pressure about name redacted information and that Manafort instructed Gates, redacted, status update on upcoming releases. Around the same time, Gates was with Trump on a trip to an airport, redacted, and shortly after the call ended, Trump told Gates that more releases of damaging information would be coming. Harm to ongoing matter, name, it is, were discussed within the campaign, and in the summer of 2016, the campaign was planning a communication strategy based on the possible release of Clinton email by WikiLeaks. The Trump campaign reacts to allegation that Russia was seeking to aid candidate Trump. In the days that followed WikiLeaks July 22, 2016 release of hacked DNC email, the Trump campaign publicly rejected suggestion that Russia was seeking to aid candidate Trump. On July 26, 2016, Trump tweeted that it was, quote, crazy, end of quote, to suggest that Russia was dealing with Trump, and that, for the record, he had zero investment in Russia. In a press conference the next day, July 27, 2016, Trump characterized this whole thing with Russia as a total deflection and stated that it was far-fetched and ridiculous. Trump said that the assertion that Russia had hacked the email was unproven, but stated that it would give him no pause if Russia had Clinton email. Trump added, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing." Trump also said that, quote, "There is nothing that I can think of that I'd rather do than have Russia friendly as opposed to the way they are right now." And in response to a question about whether he would recognize Crimea as Russia territory and consider lifting sanctions, Trump replied, "We'll be looking at that. Yeah, we'll be looking." End of quote. During the press conference, Trump repeated, "I have nothing to do with Russia," 5 times. He stated that the closest he came to Russia was that Russian may have purchased a home or condo from him. He said that after he held the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow in 2013, he had been interested in working with Russian companies that, quote, "wanted to put a lot of money into development in Russia," end of quote, but it never worked out, end of quote. He explained, quote, "Frankly, I didn't want to do it for a couple of different reasons. But we had a major developer that wanted to develop property in Moscow and other places. But we decided not to do it," end of quote. The Trump Organization, however, had been pursuing a building project in Moscow, the Trump Tower Moscow project, from approximately September 2015 through June 2016, and the candidate was regularly updated on development, including possible trips by Michael Cohen to Moscow to promote the deal and by Trump himself to finalize it. Now I can see why Republicans who are so eager to defend Trump would not want to use him as a role model. I'm saying that it's not part of the report. Cohen recalled speaking with Trump after the press conference about Trump's denial of any business dealing in Russia, which Cohen regarded as untrue. Trump told Cohen that Trump Tower Moscow was not a deal yet and said, "Why mention it if it is not a deal?" According to Cohen, at around this time, in response to Trump's disavowal of connection to Russia campaign, an advisor had developed a party line that Trump had no business with Russia and no connection to Russia. In addition to denying any connection with Russia, the Trump campaign reacted to reports of Russian election interference in aid of the campaign by seeking to distance itself from Russian contacts. For example, in August of 2016, Foreign Policy Advisor J.D. Gordon declined an invitation to Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak residence because the timing was, quote, "not optimal," end of quote, in view of media reports about Russian interference. On August 19, 2016, Manafort was asked to resign amid media coverage scrutinizing his tie to a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine and linked to Russian business. And when the media published stories about Page's connection to Russia in September 2016, Trump campaign official terminated Page association with the campaign and told the press that he had played no role in the campaign. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first set of emails stolen by a Russian intelligence agency from Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. The same day, the federal government announced that, quote, "the Russian government directed the recent compromises of email from U.S. person and institution, including from U.S. political organization," end of quotes. The government statement directly linked Russian hacking to the release on WikiLeaks with the goal of interfering with the presidential election and concluded, quote, that only Russia's senior most official could have authorized these activities, end of quote, based on their scope and sensitivity. On October 11, 2016, Podesta stated that publicly that the FBI was investigating Russia's hack and said that candidate Trump might have known in advance that the hacked email were going to be released. Vice President Mike Pence was asked whether the Trump campaign was in cahoots with WikiLeaks in releasing damaging Clinton-related information, and responded, quote, nothing could be further from the truth, end of quote. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. I hope this presentation was useful to you, provide you with some knowledge of sort about aspect of life. If not, you already know what to do. Send us your comment, criticism, suggestion. Let us know how we can do it better. As I always say, this program is not going anywhere. You might as well help make it better. In the meantime, if you have a topic you would like us to talk about, let us know. We will research it. We will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Tomorrow, I hope you can join us again at 10:30 a.m., in which we will continue with the Miller's reading Usually we talk about a controversial issue, but the July 17th, which is the date Mueller will be on Capitol Hill, will also be the last day we will do the reading of the Mueller report. As such, we try to cover as much ground as possible. So we will continue the reading tomorrow and hope you have a wonderful afternoon or evening, whichever it happened to be. Good day. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, The Place for Common Sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.